Hi, I'm Donald Osborne, and welcome to the season finale of Audrain Mansions and Motorcars. Those of you who watch this series know that I'm the master of the tenuous connection, but I'm going to make a very direct connection right now. First and foremost, I want to thank our subscribers. Our growth on the Audrain Museum Network has been exponential, and it's due to your support and loyalty. To those of you who have not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of the new content we post on this channel, at least 2 videos a week. You'll see cars from 1902 to 2022 all being driven, discussed, and experienced. Thank you very much for watching, and oh, by the way, a very direct connection. I'm standing in front of a 1956 DeSoto Firefly convertible, which you'll see in the episode coming up. Thanks. Subscribe, comment, share.
The car I'm driving right now, my favorite class of automobile, original and unrestored. This is a 1949 Cadillac Durham Limousine. You know, in 1949, I believe Cadillac really made the best car in the world. It was so far ahead of everybody else. It's had a V8 with overhead valves when Rolls-Royce still had a straight 6. This had automatic transmission when Rolls-Royce had a manual. This had power windows. You could get air conditioning. It really was the height of performance and luxury, and I believe truly the standard of the world. Would you agree, Donald?
Absolutely, Jay, and a car certainly worthy of our location, Bellevue Avenue in Newport, Rhode Island. Gliding along this boulevard here with the homes from the great Gilded Age, these wonderful seasonal cottages that were built by the ultra-wealthy. This is definitely a car that is very much at home here, because this car was indeed at home here.
Right, and the fact that they called them cottages just annoyed ordinary people, because they were huge, overly done gilded mansions, weren't they?
Exactly. Some had a little bit more of a homey feel than others.
Right.
And the one that we're headed to right now, I think, in my opinion, suits that category. And it's the great home called Rough Point that was owned for a very long time by Dorris Duke, the tobacco heiress. And indeed, this 1949 Cadillac Durham limousine was commissioned by Dorris Duke and used by her to commute between Duke Farms, her home in New Jersey, and this home here in Newport.
You know, it's hard to make a good-looking limousine because they take an ordinary car and they stretch the proportions. And I wouldn't call this car a handsome car. I'd call it more an imposing car.
Absolutely. It's a car with great presence
Right.
and also great historical interest, because Durham, a coach builder in Rosemont, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, was the longest-lasting American coachworks. They started building horse-drawn carriages in the 1880s and lasted until the mid-1960s, mostly building armored version of limousines.
But this car drives surprisingly well, and although it's only 160 horsepower, it feels much faster because it's a heavy automobile. I mean, as my dad would say, it's got a lot of pep, you know? I mean, it can move, and you can cruise on the freeway 65, 70, 75 all day long with this thing.
This certainly must have been a very, very smooth and comfortable way to travel from New Jersey up to Rhode Island, and it would make the trip a lot easier than it would be in a car without this kind of power and sophistication.
Sure, sure.
The other thing which is quite interesting is that Dorris Duke had very, very, very interesting tastes. She was known for her great collecting, lots of wonderful porcelain objects, but for her car, she seemed to like things very formal and somewhat simple.
Yeah.
We saw in a previous segment the 1938 Packard Rolston Landaulet that she ordered when she was 25 years old, and not many 25-year-old would order a Packard Landaulet, but that was the kind of thing that she liked.
Yeah.
You know, and you could tell that this is a car that has all that presence that you spoke of, but not flashy at all.
I mean, something I find unusual is that rear view mirror on that side. Just the shape and design of it is that side. I guess it's a side mirror, not a rear view mirror. But
Yeah, it's an interesting touch, and it also makes the story that she purchased this car in 1949 because her chauffeur had wrecked the previous Cadillac that she had, and after her 1938 Packard, she favored Cadillacs.
yeah,
She had a number of Cadillacs through her life, and so this was certainly a car that would have seen a lot of miles with Dorris Duke in it.
and I've always been a sucker for a split windshield. I don't know why I like the split windshield look, because it really hinders your view. But there's something cozy about it. It almost makes you feel like I'm in one of those Ford tri-motor planes. You know?
I was going to exactly say that. A plane or a great motor yacht,
Right.
you know, with that wonderful split windshield.
I remember my dad telling me, "No, it's good because if you crack it, you just have to replace half the windshield."
Even better, a practical reason.
Yeah, practical reason. Yeah. So Donald, what mansion are we going to look at today?
We're looking at Rough Point, and it is so called because it's one of the two exposed points on the ocean here in Newport, a spectacular site for a house, and a spectacular house was built on it.
Okay. So Rough Point makes no reference to some sort of S&M thing. It's strictly
It's the ocean.
It's the
exactly.
ocean.
Yeah, it's the ocean, Jay. In this case, it's just the ocean.
just the ocean.
Exactly. And here we are at Rough Point.
I mean, is it rough because the waves crash again? I mean, what
Correct.
is,
It is a point. It's a term that was devised by the sailors many, many, many years before there were any houses built on this end of the island.
Okay.
Because of the way the rocks point out here into the ocean coming out of Easton's Bay.
You know, everything is original on this car except the tires. Some sharp-eyed viewers might notice that they seem smaller than they should be. And it is because when we got this car, it had the original tires on it, which were too dangerous to drive on, even at slow speeds. So we quickly went to a discount tire place 2 days ago. These are the only ones we could find that fit. And they ride fine, but they make the car sit a little lower, and it looks proportionally off this much.
Exactly. And the only other thing not original about the car was the fact that I was riding in the front rather than in the back, where a person of my position certainly should be riding.
That's right, that's right. And the other odd thing is the seat as the chauffeur is so upright. People thought, oh, it must be great to drive these cars. They're horrible to drive because the seat is as forward as it can be. They try to find the shortest men possible to drive these things. And you drive literally like this. You can't recline it, you don't care, because the idea is to give the person in the back all the room.
The rear compartment of this car is also quite comfortable. Again, it also affects the style.
Right.
The style is about the car being designed from the inside out. So there's incredible headroom, incredible shoulder room, leg room, and also unusually for a lot of limousines you see with jump seats, once the jump seats are up, there's no room at all inside. But
Right.
There's actually still room inside this car with the jump seat raised.
And this has to be one of the first cars with a vinyl roof, isn't it?
Rather than the leather roof coverings that they used in the 1930s.
Right.
And also, since Dorris Duke also ordered that wonderful 1938 Rolston Landaulet Packard, this car, while not a Landaulet, still has the stitching in the roof to give the impression
Right.
of the Landaulet roof.
We should explain Landaulet means the top reclines from here back. So as a passenger, you would have the benefit of a convertible, of course, the chauffeur getting nothing, but this would just fold all the way back so you would be open into the air. And I must say, nothing drives like an original automobile because it's exactly what it was like when new. I mean, give or take some wear and tear. It shifts nicely, it's quiet, and it has very few miles. How many miles on this car?
Well, it was a commuter car from New Jersey up to, it's reading, I think,
37,000?
37,000.
37,000 is not bad for a car that's 70 years old.
And of course, it's so incredibly appropriate that we have this Cadillac. Not only was it owned by Dorris Duke, but the fact that it is original, because originality and preservation were very, very central to her existence. In fact, she began the Newport Restoration Foundation in the late 1960s to preserve and restore 17th and 18th century Newport, which had been largely ignored up to that time. And the work that she started still continues to today, and Newport Restoration Foundation is the caretaker of this home, which is open to the public.
And this is all, see, if this is LA, it would be a wood structure with phony stone facing, but this is all stone, isn't it?
All stone. This house was designed by Peabody and Stearns for Frederick Vanderbilt and completed in 1892. Dorris Duke's father bought the house in 1922 and engaged Horace Trumbauer, who also designed Miramar and the Elms here, to do a bit of updating and expansion of the house. But I'm happy to say that the original design of the house still exists. It still stays here, still has that presence that Peabody and Stearns intended. This English country house, and unlike a lot of the grand houses of Newport, this house really feels homey.
Right.
The rooms are comfortable, they're rooms that you could live in, and Dorris Duke really used this as her home. Make no mistake, while the domestic feel of Rough Point is undeniable, equally so is the great presence of the rooms. But they still possess a warmth, which can be seen in the Great Hall, with its large windows, warm-toned oak raised paneled walls, and rich tapestries. You can imagine curling up in one of the wing-back chairs with a book, even in a room this grand. Even more inviting is the music room, a great and elegant salon with Versailles parquet floors, where Dorris Duke hosted and sometimes performed in musical evenings. Designed to encourage conversational groups, it never feels intimidating or created for external display. And she had interesting tastes.
Yeah.
In addition to great porcelains and tapestries, she also loved animals. And here in the lawn, we can see these wonderful topiary camels, which were topiary examples of her pet camels, Princess and Baby,
Right.
who lived here at Rough Point in the 1980s and 1990s.
Wow.
There's a very famous story that there was a storm coming up, and there's a great garden room in the back of the house, and she wanted to make sure that the camels would be safe. So she brought them into the garden room to be safe. And they didn't like the storm, and they didn't like being inside, and so apparently there are actually teeth marks in some of the trim inside the room, because they wanted to get out. They said, you know, we don't belong in here, we want to be outside.
You know, the thing I find amazing is the houses don't really change a whole lot. I remember seeing a picture of the Stanley twins with the Stanley steamer in 1903 in front of their house in Newton. And then I saw the same picture like 70 years later with a modern car in front of it, and the house is exactly the same. You know, our transportation changes, our styles change, but homes don't really change a great deal. We seem to live in, we're comfortable with the same look and the same feel. I mean, there are modern houses now, certainly, but most people still seem to prefer a traditional styled home, don't
Well,
they?
and a house like this, too, that is so appropriate for its setting.
Right.
It's also unusual in that a lot of houses built in this period of stone had very small windows. However, this is a house on a spectacular piece of land on the ocean, and there are large windows everywhere. So you actually get to take advantage of the view, which is very unusual in many of the houses built at this period.
How long did it take to build this house?
This house was built in over a 4-year period,
Okay.
which is fairly long actually for the construction here. The clients here had a tendency to be people who were, I won't say impatient, but many of these great houses were built in 2 years.
Well, see, that's
something which would
amazing
be
to me, because I would
yeah.
like my contractor is doing my bathroom to talk to these people, because it's been 18 months and nothing is finished yet. Yet you built this entire structure in the 1800s in like 2 to 4 years. That's unbelievable.
Exactly. They employed armies of craftsmen to come on site to build these things, and many of the features of these homes were also created on site, which is an amazing thing. A lot of the carving was done on site, and
You realize you couldn't even build a home like this today because you don't have the stonemasons. You know, so many Italian, German craftsmen come over who could, like when you look at some of the stone walls and the farms around here, the stone are perfectly straight and they all line up, and they're flat on the top because the stones have all, it's
building
amazing.
a dry stone wall is one of the
Right.
most difficult things on the
Yeah,
planet.
Exactly. Tell us about our second car here.
Jay, it's something very different than this Cadillac, but I think very much in the spirit of Dorris Duke. Let's take a
go
look. So I know, Jay, that we'll have perhaps a slightly different opinion on what constitutes a quiet and conservative 1950s Chrysler car. But I think that this DeSoto fits that description. You know, for somebody who wanted a little more than a Plymouth or a Dodge could offer,
Right.
but didn't want to go to the flash of a Chrysler 300 or an Imperial, the DeSoto, especially a model like this Fireflight, offered all of the sort of luxury and dash you could have, but in a slightly more muted way.
Yeah, I think this was sort of Chrysler's attempt to mimic General Motors. You had DeSoto was sort of their Oldsmobile, slightly below a Buick, but above a Chevrolet.
Right.
And there was only a couple of $100 that really separated this from the next. It's why DeSoto disappeared. I think '59 was the last year of DeSoto. And they had some real styling and some interesting ideas, but it was basically Chrysler running gear all through it.
Great performance, certainly, for the time, and also, again, for somebody like Dorris Duke never owned one of these cars, but for someone like her to have the kind of presence that you'd want to have without the flash. Plus, I just love the details on this car. Just like the details on this house are amazing. The stonework and the chimneys and the dormers. Just look at this interior. It's just absolutely magnificent.
Yeah.
The floating clock, the sculpted dashboard. In fact, it's quite interesting. What does that sculpted dashboard remind you of? The 1960s Thunderbirds?
Well,
with the two coves?
actually, it looks like a Packard Caribbean to me. Yeah. Same thing. Has the gold touches, and it has the clock and the steering wheel, which is kind of interesting. Every time you turned the wheel, you were winding the clock. You know, so that
Which
was
actually
kind
I
of
could use on my watch today.
Yeah, same
but,
thing. Same
it's,
thing. And you had those tail lights with the sort of, as if it's a jet plane.
Jet plane,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
The entire 1950s jet influence is present
Again,
here.
that came from General Motors. That came from Harley Earl. He mimicked the fighter planes of World War II in
absolutely,
Korea.
yes.
Yeah, and with the Cadillac with the little fins, and that's what Chrysler tried to do here as well.
But it's a car that I think certainly has Newport presence. You know, this is a car that you can certainly see cruising around the streets of Newport when it was brand new and equally at home today.
Well, this is sort of the precursor to the forward look, which really came into its own at Chrysler in 1957. This is sort of a sneak peek of what he could do. It still looked conservative with some flair, but the next year is when it really went crazy, didn't it?
Exactly. This car shows all of the details that came from the concept cars he did with Ghia in Italy in the early and mid 1950s, and he's beginning to apply them here to these cars. And remember, you know, a great story, you being a great Chrysler enthusiast, after the airflow disaster in the 1930s, it took a very long time for Chrysler to come to the front again of design. They were very nervous about it, and Virgil Exner brought them there.
Well, Chrysler had a president at the time who didn't believe you should drive a car without wearing a hat. He always wore a hat, so he wanted a car where a man could wear a hat in the car. So you had these high-roofed, kind of ugly, it wasn't low and sleek. This is the precursor to the forward look, as I said. I remember in 1957, the slogan was, "Suddenly it's 1960." And people were like, what happened? The 1960 cars are here 3 years early. And this is the precursor to that, so pretty cool.
And then, of course, you talked about how we live in these houses with styles changing with cars. The next car we're going to go to, I think, is, to me, a great example of subtlety and presence.
I'm trying to figure out how you came to that conclusion, because when I see this car, I don't think of subtlety and presence. I don't think of Dorris Duke, but show us what we have.
Absolutely.
Donald, I'm curious to hear what sort of tenuous connection this Porsche has to Dorris Duke and Newport.
Well, Jay, you know after all these years working with me that I am the absolute master of the tenuous connection.
That's right, right.
And here I will bring all the points together. Dorris Duke, when she was 25 years old and she inherited, was the richest young woman in the entire world. Today, I think that if you had a situation with a great inheritance like that, a young woman of 25 would probably not order a Land O'Lakes limousine as Dorris Duke did,
Right.
but instead might choose something like this.
Interesting.
It's a 2016 Porsche 911R. To many, including myself, the ultimate high-performance Porsche special edition of the modern age. It has just about all the performance of the street-to-track GT3 RS,
Right.
but without any of the external drama. No huge wing, no fins on the fenders, no front splitter.
Right,
It's
right.
the performance in a more subtle package, something I think that Dorris Duke would have appreciated.
Okay. Yeah. Well, with yellow with stripes is not really subtle, but okay, I guess so. I guess. And of course, you never know. You know, I knew some Italian guys of mine that were quite wealthy, and they were 22. They all bought Lincolns, and I said to them, "What are you guys going to do when you're like 50? What are you going to buy? If you're buying a Lincoln town car at 22 years old?" So, okay, maybe Dorris Duke. And would she be driving herself, or did she drive, by the way?
She did drive, yes,
Yeah.
indeed. She enjoyed driving, and talking about the transition, she started at 25 with that 1938 Packard Rolston Landaulet, and one of the latest cars she bought during her life was a Jaguar XJS.
Oh, okay.
So she made that progression. So,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
who knows? She might have eventually gotten here had
Yeah.
she lived long enough.
Yeah, yeah, and it's good product placement. Let's go for a ride. And they only built 991 of these, correct? That's
991.
The 991 series.
In honor of the 991 series, of which this is a part, this is the last of the 991 cars. So Jay, do you think that this is the ride that our modern day Dorris Duke might take from her Bellevue
I don't know,
Avenue?
I think Dorris Duke. I mean, actually, this is probably the most comfortable version of a high-performance Porsche. You know, the GT3, GT2 are all good and everything, but it might be a little harsh for the road. This one, you've got the lightweight doors, you got the door pulls, you have the things you need like air conditioning and a radio, but you've got the manual gearbox, you've got this incredibly light steering. It is an incredibly tight car. It's amazing to me how almost from billet this car feels, you know. Sadly, there's no road in the island here where you can really make this thing do what it's supposed to do. But it's a naturally aspirated car, which means it does not have a supercharger
Or a turbocharger.
Or a turbocharger. It's just going through, well, no carburation, obviously, fuel injection, but, and the steering is wonderfully, I mean, it doesn't move this way at all. It's so stiff.
But as you said, this car has just about all the performance of the GT3 RS, but it's civilized. You've got 500 horsepower and 338 foot-pounds of torque,
Right.
but you can actually use it even in these conditions,
Right.
you know? It's very much, to me, again, maintaining my tenuous connections.
Right,
This is the kind of car that you could actually use
right.
as opposed to something that you stand next to and pose, and that's not very Dorris Duke.
When I talk to some friends of mine who are just horsepower centric, you know, they'll say, well, the Corvette has 700 horsepower. This is an extremely light car, so your power to weight ratio is quite good. And it feels more powerful than 500 horsepower. And Porsche has a tendency to sort of undervalue
Understate,
their
yes,
performance or
correct.
understate their performance. They'll put 0 to 60, 3.5, but it's really 3.1 or something like that. So, I mean, it just feels so nice.
There's nothing ever wrong with under-promising and over-delivering.
Right, right.
And that's what really I think this car does. My one sort of demerit I would give this car, if there was one, are the seats. I think the seats for a car designed primarily for the road are a little aggressive.
Right, right. Yeah, the big wallet, big buttocks is kind of the way it goes. You know? I mean, that's all the way it works. If you got the money to buy a car like this, you probably enjoy your eclairs and your donuts, and you know.
Well, perhaps as part of the ownership experience, perhaps a personal trainer would come in
True.
as well.
Well, you know, that's the one thing I love about even the early Porsche, like the 356s. I've got a Carrera, and the seats are so comfortable. I got my Lancia Aurelia, 1958, and a big, comfortable leather seat, and a big wooden steering wheel, and it's so nice to drive, so incredibly comfortable.
And that's the key thing. If you want to spend time in a car, and a car like this encourages you to drive it and to spend time in it, but you want to be comfortable,
Right.
and to perform at your best. The other thing which is quite interesting about this car is that it's an homage, of course, to the great 911R of 1967,
Right.
the first factory racing version of the 911. And that car didn't have as great a racing history as they would have hoped, because they never built enough to homologate it for GT racing, so it had to race as a prototype, and it was outclassed by the competition. But the idea of taking the 911 and sort of reducing it to its essentials is what this car is all about. But again, as times change, what we consider essential changes, because this is an essential performance Porsche with a navigation, air conditioning, power windows.
Right. And the nice thing is, it's not so powerful that I don't enjoy driving it slowly. Like cruising around Newport, maybe you're 5 or 6 miles over the limit, but that's about it. And it's just fun to sightsee in a car because you're not pulling against horsepower that wants to run all the time. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the old days where the plugs load up and all that kind of thing. And it has that wonderful sound, of course, that flat six, unique to Porsche.
Yeah, just like we all grew up on the sound of a Volkswagen Flat 4 and that unique sound. The Porsches have always had this sound through all the generations. A question, through the generations, this is the 991, the final 991 variant of the 911. Do you think Porsche should have kept the 911 name as they have all these years, or given these cars different names because they have such a different character?
No, I think, branding is one of the most important things in marketing, because for every expert who knows his cars, there are 100 who don't know anything but would like to get one of those. And if it has the name that their friends go, oh, they got a 911. The 944 was a fine car.
Right.
An excellent car. I drove them, I liked them, but there was nothing Porsche about it. It didn't seem special.
And the 928 as well, a great GT car.
928, a great GT. The 928 was supposed to replace the 911, and then was it Peter Schultz, the American? He kind of came in and said, no, people know 911. That's what the name was made. For example, if you want a good example of branding, Ford has a new electric car called the Mustang.
Yes.
Okay, if they just call it the
Ford
Electron
Electric.
or the Ford Electra or something with electricity or charge in the name, I don't think there'd be excitement about it. But the name Mustang means performance and sporty and fun, so that's the way it goes. So yes, I think Porsche would be out of business today if they had not kept the 911.
And of course, the idea of a car that can offer you performance and a bit of exclusivity as well. The original plan was to build 5,000 of these.
Right.
And they instead made it a limited edition, first offering it to the owners of the Porsche 918 hybrid car.
Right.
And they almost subscribed the entire production run to those people as well.
Right.
And a lot of people at Porsche were very disappointed that more people didn't get to experience this car.
You probably make more money with 991 of these at a higher price than you do selling 5,000 of them at a lower price. So, and that's sort of the way it works. Let's see what she does. Yeah, it's hard to communicate how well this drives and feels. It really is a nice car. And I don't know how much lighter it is than a 911, but it feels hundreds of pounds lighter to me.
Yeah, the entire front end is carbon fiber, so that makes a big difference. And it's very interesting too, with your experience driving the 1949 Cadillac Limousine. You commented on its road holding and its handling.
Yeah.
And this is obviously a very, very, very different vehicle than that.
Right.
But it is ultimately the experience of the driver on the road that determines the character of the car.
Right. But this is a car you could drive New Jersey to Rhode Island. You could drive New Jersey to Florida, and it wouldn't be anything, It's amazing how as one this car feels. And I think one reason Porsche is successful is the build quality. When you build basically the same car, and I don't mean that insultingly, you can take care of all the little squeaks and all the little... When you have to do a new design, a new body every 2 or 3 years, there's always those little problems that are going to be compromised because you got to get it out there,
Exactly, and Porsche can also take a lot more time and spend a lot more money on the development of these 911 models because, frankly, the company is making their profit on the crossovers and the SUVs.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain advantage as an owner. For example, I have a 1989 Turbo R Bentley that actually I bought the first one in the country. And because I keep it in nice shape, people say to me, what is this? This is like a 2005 or something? No, it's a 98. 98? What? Really? I mean, you know, how is that even possible? You know?
There is a timelessness, exactly, to the designs as well, that, you know, and also the unmistakable form of the shape. And the point of a car like this, to put the final point in my now not so tenuous connection between Dorris Duke and the 911R, is the fact that this is a car that has all the classic qualities that Dorris Duke would appreciate. It's a car that is timeless.
Right.
It's a car that 50 years from now, 60 years from now, people will appreciate for its dynamic qualities and its historic importance to the marque.
Right.
And I think that just as Rough Point stands as a monument, as Dorris Duke's Newport Restoration Foundation stands to preserve the work of history, I think we're riding in an historic Porsche right now.
Right. But the fascinating part is, although a lot of people drive dangerously, this has airbags and all the safety equipment, this will never kill as many people as Dorris Duke did with her tobacco.
Jay, you've always been such a gate crasher.
There you go. Well, this is almost the perfect car to sign off with by stepping on the gas and doing this.